Hello, how are you today? Welcome to Now What? This is the podcast that helps you move forward, one step at a time. Every Sunday, we hear a message at church, but after that, life keeps going. So here, we stop and ask, now what? What do I do with what I heard? This space is for that, for questions, for real talk, and for taking small steps in faith. Today, we're talking about something that matters. Later, I'll be talking with a guest. We'll go deeper and share real stories, just like yours. Let's get into it.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Now What? Today, we are not just talking about a message. Today, we are talking to the man who delivers them every Sunday. Join us and lead the pastor from the New Life Christian Church, Dwayne Shorridge. His life story, full of faith, obedience, and transformation, has shaped everything we do here. From growing up in Oakland to hearing God's calls on a train station, today we get to know not just the pastor, the man behind the pulpit. Ready? Let's divine in.
¿Alguna vez has escuchado un sermón y te has quedado pensando, ¿eso qué significa para mí? Ever listened to a sermon and thought, what does that mean for me? Bienvenido a ¿Y ahora qué? Welcome to Now What? Aquí no buscamos respuestas perfectas, pero sí conversaciones reales. We are not looking for perfect answers, but real conversations. Queremos explorar juntos lo que realmente resuena en nuestras vidas después de escuchar la prédica del domingo. We want to explore together what really resonates in our lives after hearing Sunday's sermon. Es un espacio para compartir, reflexionar y descubrir juntos cómo las palabras que nos tocan pueden ser la clave para dar sentido a nuestro caminar con Dios en nuestro día a día. It's a space to share, reflect, and discover together how the words that touch us can be the key to making sense of our walk with God in our daily life. Let's dive into the journey. Comenzamos.
Hello, welcome, Pastor D. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you, Jeremy, for inviting me. I appreciate it.
A very pleasure to come to us on the podcast. It's a privilege to have you here with us today. Thank you for the invitation. So, Pastor, we want to make a couple questions for you. So let's see who's the man behind the pulpit.
All right, I'll answer them as best as I can.
What do you remember most about growing up in Oakland?
Well, it seems like so long ago, but I remember growing up in Oakland. Probably my earliest memories, maybe I was three years old, around there. We lived in an apartment, and I think we lived on the second or third floor. We moved out of there when I was fairly young to San Francisco, to a house called Athens Street. And from there, I spent my next 7-8 years growing up in San Francisco, moving around. We lived in a hotel for a little bit, and then we ended up moving to the Army Street San Francisco housing projects in San Francisco, across the street from Garfield Park. And we stayed there probably for about 4 years, and I went to elementary school there. And then my mom and dad separated. So a little bit of context and backdrop is because my father had come out of San Quentin prison, who raised me, and he was 29, my mother was 17. And so she was underage. She became pregnant with me. And that lifestyle of my mother being a prostitute and drugs involved created an atmosphere that was very difficult. So those early years growing up were filled with a lot of different things that young families shouldn't experience. But by God's grace, we escaped that. When I was about 10 or 11, my mom finally left my father. We ended up moving to Vallejo, Benicia, and ended up in foster care for a few years. My sister, my brother, and myself, 3 of us, and I'm the eldest. And then we ended up moving back to Oakland when my mother was able to regain custody of all 3 of us. And that's the short version. It was in my teenage years when I was about 15, 16, someone shared the gospel of Jesus Christ with me for the first time. It was very difficult for me to understand because I didn't have a backdrop or a context. We didn't grow up in church. We didn't read the Bible. My experience with church was when we needed money, my mother would go and get money from the priest at the church and he would help us. So that was a good experience, but we never went to services or anything like that. When I was probably in my 20s, after I was married, God's grace came upon my life and I yielded my heart to Jesus, and my family and I, we began following Christ, and that would have been in 1991. So I was a few years back.
Yes.
During that time, I worked in banking for almost 20 years, and then I got a calling to full-time ministry in 2003 and responded to that. And I've been serving here at New Life Christian Church full-time ministry since 2003. And that's where we are today.
All right. Sounds good. But the story was so fast that I would like to be more curious about how was Dubayan when he was a young guy? I mean, at the time, the fun time was a more fun time about now. Right now, it's only technology. That's it. Like play soccer, football.
Yeah. Growing up, in that era of time, we didn't have, of course, technology like today. So for fun, what we would do is we would roller skate. These were the quad skates, not the inline skates. And we would skate down the hills, and we played a lot of, I call them urban games. We played a game called Hide the Belt, where you would hide the belt and whoever found it got to hit everybody with the belt until they got back on base. We played, the typical kid games, tag and freeze tag. We loved to be outside when we could and just hanging out with different people. We had a park across the street, so we played in the playground at the park, played basketball. I only played one organized sports growing up, soccer. And that was because my friend's dad was a coach and he paid for me. We didn't have a lot of money growing up. We didn't have the opportunity to do Boy Scouts or organized sports. So it wasn't until I was maybe about 12 that I played my first organized sports. But, we played catch, football, and basketball. And I wasn't really much for baseball. It was too slow. I didn't really care for that. But that's what mostly we did. We hung out with friends and went swimming during the summer and things like that.
You was working as manager, right, in the bank. How was the experience when you started growing up banking season?
I ended up, when I was in high school, I went to Fremont High School in Oakland, and I ended up dropping out of high school when I was in 10th grade, so I didn't finish my senior year at all. I started working full-time when I was 15. I ended up getting a job, fast food restaurant, and then I got a union job working in a factory making parts. But I realized in a few years like that really wasn't what I wanted to do. I ended up going back to school. I got my diploma and I ended up going to college, getting my degree for computers. And that's when I really found what I enjoyed doing was computer programming and processing and banking. And that's what I did for almost 20 years. And my final place of employment, I worked in San Francisco for information technology. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the people that I worked with. I enjoyed the technology. Of course, now we're 20 plus years difference from back then.
Yeah,
but certainly
a few changes.
There was quite a bit of change. But I certainly enjoyed the people that I worked with. the staff and managers were all wonderful, wonderful folks.
To this period of your time, how was the relationship with Jesus?
At first, no, I wasn't going to church because I started in computers before I was a Christian. And then it wasn't until 91 that I gave my heart to the Lord, and things shifted for me. So I was encouraged to share my faith with my coworkers, my supervisors, and others around me. And then I ended up becoming a manager, and I shared my faith with with our staff during that time as well. But wherever I was, whether it was at banking or programming, I always wanted to share my faith with other people to let them know of God's goodness, in our lives, of what he has done. So that's what I really spent my time. And then also after work, I would volunteer for juvenile hall. And my wife and I volunteered to serve on, sports leagues and school. They had the parent teachers PTA we served on. So we always wanted to look for ways that we could serve and opportunities that we could always share the gospel with people as we had opportunity to do so.
I call this section the calling one. Is remarkable to me when you share the time you got to work about the homeless in the bar station. Can you tell us more about it?
Well, when I worked in San Francisco, that was my last career before coming on to full-time ministry. There were quite a few folks that I would meet when I would take public transportation. Sometimes I would drive in, but when I would take BART, there were, a few homeless people. And one in particular, there's a couple, but one in particular, I was catching the bus to work and I was late, and I was running for the bus, and there was a gentleman sitting by a garbage can, just minding his own business. And the Lord spoke to me, I want you to go pray for him. I want you to minister to him. And I was like, well, Lord, I got to get to work. I'm late. I got to hurry up and get there, and I'll miss my bus. And the Lord said, don't worry, there'll be another bus. And I said, okay. So I went back, saw the gentleman sitting there, and I said, hey, how you doing? He looked up at me and he says, oh, I'm doing good. And I said, what are you reading there? And he was reading a Gideon's Pocket Bible. And I said, oh man, that's great. And we were talking. I said, hey, would you like to get breakfast? And he said, I'd love to get breakfast. I haven't eaten for 3 days. And so we went to a little cafe across the street. We were chatting and just talking, getting to know each other. And then he just began to share with me. He didn't know anything about me, but he began to share with me his life story of how he ended up homeless and that he had a family before. And he said, I had a calling in my life, in ministry. He goes, but I ran from God like Jonah, and this is where I am now. And then he looked right at me and he says, but don't you ever run from the calling of God in your life. And I never forgot that. And this was before I was a pastor or anything. I was just serving in ministry at the time. And I remembered that very well, and always took that to heart.
And the moment when you see this man, right, and he started sharing his story, your mind was like, oh, come on, why are you talking about that? I mean, hurry up, I gotta go to work. So what's your mind in that moment? So when your mind is like focusing on what he's talking about?
No, because once the Lord spoke to me and said, don't worry, I focused on our time in that immediate moment. So as we're, having breakfast together, I want to listen to where he's at. I want to get to know him. And he's a believer, and he was reading his Bible, and he just wanted to share that part of his story with me. And I know now why God was having him share that with me, so that I wouldn't run away from the calling. But I just wanted to hear where he was at. And that was part of that. So I wasn't really too worried about being late or anything like that. I knew God had taken care of it. And I really wanted to just be in the moment with him at that time.
I believe after the conversation, the rest of the day has changed, right?
Absolutely, it has. Yes, it has. Yeah.
How was your mind and your heart at that moment?
Well, that was something at the time, because I wasn't serving in full-time ministry. I was working as a manager. It just embedded in my spirit of being faithful to God, because at my job, it was a wonderful job. It was one of the best jobs I ever had. But I also knew too, at some place, God was going to call me to serve in ministry. I didn't know when. I didn't know exactly how. I just knew that he would. And my heart was, I don't want to be so attached to my job that when God says, hey, I need you to leave this and move forward, that I'm unwilling to, because I love my job so much. And I did love my job tremendously. I was really blessed to be where I was at. But I wanted to make sure that when God says to move, that I do so. And I know now that seed was planted there. So when the Lord says, hey, it's time to go, which was a few years after, I'd be ready to move forward.
So let's say that moment is when you start to see the purpose of God in your life?
I think it was becoming a little bit clearer. I knew early on when I became a Christian that I would be involved with ministry always, whether it was serving in prison or juvenile hall or community. But I didn't know exactly when. My purpose, my idea was I would work in banking till I was about 50, and then I would retire, and then I'd work in ministry because everything would be taken care of and paid for. But that's not how that's not how God worked it out. He changed that plan quite a bit.
So I know you started serving to the juvenile hall, right? How was the passion? How started the passion to go to the places? How started? Because you see another pastor or somebody tell you, hey, why you don't go there? How started the passion for them?
When we were early on in our Christian walk, we were always looking for ways to be able to help our community or help serve in our church at that time in 91. At that time, I was serving in a ministry called Full Gospel Businessmen Fellowship, and it was a group of professional businessmen. One of them was a doctor, all different types of profession, and they would meet once a month. They would have an outreach to businessmen, and I was a part of that for a number of years. They had a little monthly newsletter, and in the newsletter, they had listed different outreach ministries that were available. And they had a little tiny section called Juvenile Hall Ministry. And for whatever reason, I don't know, it just caught my eye, and I inquired about it. And when I inquired about it, I went through the classes, went through the training, and that brought me to starting to minister at juvenile, because I had never done that before, and I didn't know what to expect. So I started doing that, and they paired me up with another seasoned person who did the training with me, and that got us started, and I'm still doing that today. Not in the same exact capacity. I used to be more regularly involved, but as a pastor, I don't have the same time frame, so I'm still involved, but not as frequent as I used to be.
Well, Pastor, do you remember your first sermon as a pastor?
Wow, that's, I don't recall my exact first sermon, to be honest, because I've preached at so many different places. I don't really recall my very first sermon. I have notes on Bible studies I've done, but I don't have a first. That's terrible. I don't remember my first sermon. When I get to heaven, I'll have to ask the Lord to show me.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing, right? Because the first steps when you take about the church, and when you start make a full-time pastor and take the New Life Christian Church a responsibility, how was feeling that?
It was very challenging in the sense of I knew God's calling, but I was afraid when I responded. And the reason why is during that time, our former pastor, Dennis McNally, had come to me and asked me if I would consider coming on full-time ministry. And at that time, I prayed about it and thought about it and fasted and responded to that. So I said yes. And when I said yes, that next week, my supervisor came to me and asked me if I would consider coming on as the vice president of information technology, IT. And at that point, I was a little confused because I thought maybe I didn't hear the Lord right. And so it began a challenge in my faith to say, because I had already committed to coming to New Life, and I was being offered a position higher up. And by God's grace, He sent people my way that spoke into my life that helped me with that, because my supervisor kept asking me why I wouldn't take the position, and I tried to explain. And finally, I met with the CEO of the bank, and he asked me the same question, and I just tried to explain that I have a calling in ministry, and they both respected that, and they said, okay, well, we respect your decision. And of course, I stayed on with the company until we hired a replacement. I think I stayed on another maybe 6 to 8 months around there before I was replaced. And then I came on ministry here at that time. So, it was a little bit of a challenge financially. The church didn't have a lot of funds to help pay for our salary at that time. So God provided a secondary job for me outside of the church that helped with the funding for our home for that first year. And then the church was able to cover that difference. And that's how God brought me in and taking care of us all these years.
And Pastor, I mean, how is your life outside the church, like other regular men, when you're in the church preaching, helping? How is the life outside the church?
So I think when my wife and I, well, first of all, my wife and I have a great relationship. I'm very blessed to have a wonderful wife that's supportive and loving, to be able to share this life with together. So outside of the church, my wife and I, we spend the most time together. We really are pretty low key. We hang out at home. We enjoy our grandchildren. We have 6 grandchildren, 2 that are home with us because our middle son and my daughter-in-law are with us at the house while they're acclimating back to California. So we really enjoy that time together with them. We enjoy just hanging out. Maybe we'll go see a movie. We like to go bowling when we can. And but most of the time just hanging out with our family and friends. We really enjoy that quite a bit.
Speaking about your wife, the transition, well, of course you know everything about it when you tell her about the situation with the bank and the situation at the church and the calling. You know you listen to God first. But when you communicate with your wife and say, you know, I think in this time, God's confirmed to me. So of course you don't think like, oh yeah, go. So what's a little challenge for you, that the way you handle?
She was extremely supportive. My wife has always been very supportive, even when I was working as a manager, because it required quite a bit of my time. I worked in San Francisco, so I commuted, and she was always supportive of that. And because of that support, I was able to have a very successful career in IT and in banking. And so when that transferred over to ministry, she was 100% supportive. There was no hesitation. And she said, honey, you know, we want to be obedient to the Lord. And because of that, it enabled me to be able to work full-time in ministry, because she worked outside of the home. And she provided additional income and support for us financially, and as well as support for our family. And so that helped me to come in full-time to ministry without any hesitation. And she's a good checkpoint for me. She keeps me in check to let me know, like, hey, slow down, or we need to focus on this, or this is important in the family. She's always been very good about communicating those values and things when because I can easily get off track and start wandering away doing stuff.
Yes, I'm ready to. And how's the time right now? Like you mentioned, when your son come home. I mean, they made their life and they go and they come back. How is this time right now? How is it feeling to be a father again, to see you just on a man?
It's an amazing season because you feel like you're replicating your season of your children over. I certainly remember when I have 3 boys. I certainly remember when they were little kids and playing with them and doing things. And now doing that with my granddaughter and my grandson, it's like reliving that all over again. You're playing with your kids. When you look at them, they look just like your kids growing up because they're the same DNA, and having those moments and playing with them. Just the other day when we got home from church here working, my grandson was so excited to see me. And so I didn't even change clothes or anything, put my bag down. He comes and into my arms and I'm holding him. I take him upstairs in my office and we're talking. He can't really communicate that well, but he tries to. So I'm talking to him and we hang out there, and I just love that moment. It's really refreshing to be able to see your grandchildren, another generation growing up after having seen your kids grown up and graduate college and have a married life. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I mean, the time where it's quiet home right now is a lot of noise, right?
It is a lot noisier now with little kids. They have a volume, and it's only one. It's either really loud or off. So the little one likes to let her voice be known, and now her little brother, he likes to let his voice be known also. He's almost going to be 2, so he's like speaking out more, and it's just really fun watching them grow together.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Pastor. It's very good, like you say, have the emotion to see little ones, the next generation in your home, and see them, what they do it, and remind memories from your own kids, right?
Yes.
Years from now, when people remember your ministry, what do you hope stays with them the most?
I think there's 2. I want to answer that in 2 ways. So ministry-wise, as a pastor, I hope that people will remember that I was a pastor that loved Jesus and communicated that to people, whether they agree or disagree, but that they would understand that I was a pastor that loved Jesus and fervently wanted to share that message with people in the church and outside of the church. But just as important for our family legacy, I want our family to know that their father loved them. And yes, I was involved with ministry. Yes, I was a pastor. But I would hope that they would remember that as a father and grandfather, that we loved them, my wife and I, that we cared for our family. We enjoyed our family and we loved them tremendously. So that part of it is just as important as the ministry side of it, because without your family, if your family is not understanding who you are, then it's really not as effective as a pastor ministering outside if you don't have the ministry at home first. So that ministry at home is the most vital. The reason that I was able to be full-time ministry is because my wife was supportive of that. And that's because we have a understanding relationship as husband and wife and loving. The reason why we were able to do that for our kids is because they understood, even though they were really young, but they were supportive. If I didn't have that family support and legacy at home, then it wouldn't have been as effective in ministry and as important. So both of those are an important legacy here in ministry and then especially at home as well.
Pastor, what is your final thoughts for someone fulfilling the calling of God and maybe they don't face one of those gentlemen to remind them? Why do you think that's going to be the key to follow the voice of God?
That question for all of us is important for us to just remember one thing, and that is to be faithful in the calling that He gives us. And so whether that calling entails coming full-time as a pastor or leaving the country as a missionary or working full-time in a factory or in management or in retail, the most important thing is for us to be faithful in following the pursuit that God has for us. That's the most important thing, and not to be so focused on our career that when God changes it, or someone might say disrupts it, that we won't follow. We want to be obedient. It's like Elijah or Elisha when he was called by Elisha, his mentor. Immediately he took the oxen and he took the yokes and he cut them up and he offered them as a sacrifice. It was an immediate response. It's like Matthew. When Jesus called Matthew as a tax collector, immediate response. When he called Peter and James and John, they left fishing. That's the most important thing, is when he calls, is that you respond, Lord, I want to be faithful to whatever capacity it is. Every ministry is important, not just pastoral. It's important in working in your career, whatever you're doing, to being faithful to that directive that God gives you. So that's the most crucial and important thing.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing a lot. I mean, we can see how is the life behind the pulpit. Thank you so much for sharing that, and I hope you enjoy. And thank you for being part of this podcast. This podcast is created by your message and New Life Christian Church, of course. And I want to give you thank you for sharing that kind of message and help us to be more close with God.
We appreciate it. Thank you for what you're doing and the opportunity to be able to participate.
Well, thank you, guys. Well, all you know, you're welcome to join us anytime. So we here in the New Life Christian Church, if you have time to come on the website, you can visit us and learn more about Walking with God. Pastor, thank you so much. And this is Now What? Thank you.
Okay? Did it go all right for you?
Thanks for listening to And Now What? Remember, if you're still breathing, God's not finished with you. So take a step, even a small one. And as always, I move forward with purpose. Until then, say it with me. Now what? See you at the mic.